take some questions from the audience. So be thinking of what you want to ask. You can find me on my website, jeffstevensgames.com. Everything good, Jenny? Okay, cool. Just want to check with my producer, make sure everything was coming across right. And Ed, you can find Ed and I both on our Twitters. This should be right underneath our names. How did you start a discussion with Ed Greenwood? I mean, it's just really cool. I'm so excited for this episode. I got to speak with Ed before we started here, and we were just having a great conversation about things. But Ed, first, let's get a little background on you. How did you start playing D&D and get into your world? How did you start? What was your first game? Let's say.
Okay, here we go. We haven't talked about this before. Okay, so I am 61 years old right now. Okay, when I was 5, I used to read every book in my father's den. My father's den was crammed with books. And I would run upstairs, usually when he had a house full of guests, and I would say, Dad, this one is great. Where's the next one? And I'd be waving some wartime paperback, with something terribly embarrassing on the cover, like Owl Hoot Trail. She was staked out nude in the sun to die, and I would wave it and my father would go, that's very good, son. But if you want any sequels, you'll have to write them yourself. The author, that one died in 1932. Oh, okay, I'd say, and I go running back downstairs to the den where my Aunt Clara, like every wartime farm woman who'd gone through the Depression, saved every brown paper bag from the supermarket, slit them up, and ironed them flat for kids to crayon on and write on. So I would write a sequel, which was terribly bad always. But I was learning how to write by copying other writers' styles and making things fit. And I was also learning how to make it seem like it was in the same setting. And this is all long before there was anything like we know as role playing games today. There was this one thing called, Kriegspiel, which was officer training, um, which you do in school now as broken telephone. But you do it for officers in different rooms, and you get the fog of war by people have to run with orders, so everything gets garbled, and they learn command staff structure. But that was it for role playing, and that had been going on literally since Napoleonic times. But beyond that, the only role playing games were actually military simulation games, not stuff you could buy in a store that was in a book or a box. So I was doing stories in the Forgotten Realms a good decade before Dungeons and Dragons existed. I tried D&D when the first 3 booklets came out. I said, "Oh, this is cool ideas, but no, it'll just devolve into an argument around the gaming table." And sure enough, it did. And I went on playing the war games that my father and various board games and stuff, and card games with my grandparents and all that stuff, until the first booklet came out that added to the 3 booklets, Greyhawk, and I said, "Oh, some cool stuff in here. Oh, beholders. Oh, all the and it was like getting ideas, but still wasn't gaming until the Monster Manual came out, and I said, "Oh, this is so cool. All the monsters from mythology plus new ones and exactly what they can do." And then they capped it a year later with the Player's Handbook, and it was Jack Vance's Fire and Forget magic system from the Dying Earth, actually spelled out. So I quietly migrated my stories that I was writing in the Forgotten Realms to use the D&D rules as a skeleton, so I wasn't cheating as a writer, so that my wizard couldn't fire endlessly like a machine gun,
Right.
stuff like that. So I was keeping myself honest by just using this. But I wasn't actually playing D&D until 1978. Um, I was buying Dragon by then, and we are all waiting for the DMG. So Dragon issue 21, Gary published the combat tables from it for all of us impatient DMs, and we started playing, and we've been playing ever since. So 1978, spring of 1978 was my first proper game. I had some, things beforehand, but they were sort of like, let's try this out. Nah, that's not going to work.
Yeah. Well, that's cool. That's great.
Yeah.
So with building your world, um, how did you start that? Did you start with one city, one location, and kind of come up with that? Did you have a whole map kind of drawn out? Did you tell me
No,
tell me how you built it?
I grew it from okay, because it was story first. I started writing about the realms, looking over the shoulder of Mert the Moneylender. Okay, Mert the Moneylender is a copy between Nicholas van Ryn from Poul Anderson's Pulsatechnic League, Shakespeare's Falstaff, and Guy Gilpatrick's drunken Scottish engineer Glencannon from his stories in the 1940s and 1950s in all the men's magazines all across the United States. Um, and he's a guy who used to be a mercenary captain, but he's now an old fat man with food spilled down his paunch. He wheezes when he runs. He can't outrun any enemies anymore. He can't outfight them anymore. So he has to outthink them anyway. Now, so I started in a northern cold port city on a seacoast, and every Mert short story ended the same way. He fled town just ahead of the authorities who are looking for him. His enemies, the new enemies he'd made during the story, and his trade rivals. And then the next story would be set in the next port, and then the next one in the next port. And it was a year later I realized I was going south along something called the Sword Coast
Mhm.
from, as it happens, Luskin, Neverwinter, da 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 da, until he landed up in Waterdeep, which was large enough that he could spread his wings and stay there for a little bit longer because there were more places to hide. I mean, more swindles to, and that was the sort of the way it got going. And a year after that, I had decided that this world was called the Forgotten Realms because we in our real world had legends of dragons and wyverns and vampires, but we didn't meet them on the street every day. But we had legends of them because they used to come here often through a whole series of gates. Later editions of the game would call them portals, but magical gates, which are a very old thing in literature. The very first novels written by William Morris, there's one called The Wood Between the Worlds, and it's full of gates. It's a wood, uh, great forest that sits in between all the different fantasy worlds. And if you step across a pool in the right direction, or you step between two trees when the moonlight's falling on them, or at any time you walk over this pebble in this direction, you your next step is in another world. It's a sort of gate crossroads. Anyway, that it's a very old idea, and I decided I would steal it. If you want to see it in early literature when you're a kid reading, just look at The Magician's Nephew or The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe, both from the Narnia series. Those are
Mhm.
gates, and
Mhm.
and the use of them happens in front of your eyes. And I decided that at one point there had been much use of these gates for trade and travel and regular caravans and merchant peddlers and stuff. And then a power group had decided to take over and control the gates, and they'd killed some of the people who knew how to use them. And we had forgotten how to get to this fantasy world. So it's the Forgotten Realms,
Mhm.
which is something that TSR immediately downplayed because they were in the middle of this, what we now refer to in hindsight as the Satanic Panic. They called it dealing with angry teenage mothers from heck. And
Right.
it meant that they couldn't sell the game in the Bible Belt of the South or whatever if they had anything that could impact negatively in the real world. And one of the things to do was to say, okay, this is not something your kids can try at home. So, meaning do stuff in the game, like run around with swords and
Right.
hurt each other. So let's just downplay that element. So it went away in the published realms.
Although we saw that in a movie that came out with
Yes.
Tom Hanks, but
Mazes and monsters.
yes, yeah, unfortunately that portrays the game negatively. And I grew up in that same time. My parents, whenever I was playing, they were asking, "Well, what are you doing? Are you doing rituals? Are you worshiping Satan?" I'm like, "No, mom, we don't do that."
Do you see
So
anybody with their clothes off? Do you see any black candles? I'm sure there's no virgins left in this city. you know,
Right.
all the no,
So
no, but you see, we used to solve that by whenever we would have like concerned ministers, clergymen who would come, and they want to go downstairs and see what we were up to. So we'd invite them downstairs and hand them the bowl of popcorn and the chips, and we'd just go on playing.
yeah.
And after a while, they'd say, um, "Well, you can go back to playing the game now. You have to sort of forget I'm here." And we said, "We are playing the game. This is it." And they go, "What?" And they go, "This is it. This is playing the game." And they'd sort of look at you strangely and say, "Oh." And if they were honest and nice people, they and credited you with intelligence, though you were younger, they'd say, "So that's it? Is this what all the fuss has been about?" And if they
Hmm.
weren't, they'd just go away again. And
Yeah.
you know, so we were converting them one person at a time.
Yeah. It's a great game. It teaches so much. I think it teaches so much, social interaction
Hmm.
and
And
just
the
your
original
imagination.
version of the original version of the game, as Gary put it out, it forces teamwork because the character classes are so limited. You have to work
Exactly. Yeah.
together.
I remember playing back then when the character classes were so limited. I didn't play the original game, but I played like the original red box and that type of thing. And uh, yeah, you were a dwarf and that was your class. It
Hmm.
was, but but no, it was so much fun back then, and to see how it's grown into fifth edition is great too. How did you keep track of the characters or the non-player characters in your world? Like, so when from you said it went from one adventure to another port to another port. After
Hmm.
each game, did you, or before each game, did you write down and create and write about that port city and the NPCs in it, or did that kind of come about as you played the game itself?
Both. I would always have a detailed map of the city,
Uh-huh.
and I would know who the big movers and shakers were and what was going on. What I called current clack. Here's the news and rumors and gossip. If they published a newspaper in the city, a broadsheet, I would I wouldn't mock up, go to the trouble of drawing or trying to print one, but I would write down the main news stories
Mhm.
so that they could come across them. And my father was a prof at a Canadian university, and I don't have any here to show you. They had these endless little 8.5 by 11 blue examination books, and imagine blue lined paper with 3-hole punch, about 16 pages. 8 pages folded in half and stapled. And you got one of those, and it was blank, and you wrote your name on the top, and then you wrote the exam, and then you handed it in. Well, what was supposed to happen for security reasons, so that people couldn't trade exams or whatever, is the instructors were supposed to destroy them all, both the unused ones and the used ones. Because the printer that turned them out had a little thing in the corner that was printing a unique number on each one. So they were trying to shred them all. Well, my father, like anybody who'd lived through uh, growing up and been born depression, growing up through the Second World War, you didn't waste things. That was wicked. You'd been told all the way through the war to save your scrap paper, save your string, save your metal, or Mr. Hitler would win the war. And so you did not throw stuff away. So instead, he brought them all home. God knows if he intended to like have a huge bonfire someday and send the house up or whatever. But he had all the written in exam books boxed neatly in bankers boxes with what they were, and all the blank ones he just had stacked around. So as we ran out of brown paper bags, we kids were allowed to write in them. So I always had a stack of these blank exam books right beside me. And I wrote things as we played, as the dungeon master. I'd write down in block caps a PC's name. Tazarakan tried to kill the lich but failed. Um, and then I would write the next character's name. So I had a running commentary. And then when the play session was over, which usually took 4.5 to 5 hours, and everybody else had gone home, before I forgot everything, I would read over what I'd written and add in the margins and stuff, the little details, particularly if I'd named an innkeeper or a
Hmm.
chambermaid or I described what this shop sold, I would add all that stuff in, because sure as shooting, one of my players 8 real months later would say, let's go back to that shop that sold the pink kumquats, not the green unripe ones, but the pink ones.
Right.
I go, oh yeah. you know
Yeah. Now, one quick thing about that. Did you use voices for your characters?
Sure, of course I used voices. It
Did
was
you
ham
continue
acting.
did you continue to use the same voice for the character 8 months later? Because that's my problem
Sure.
is I forget which voice I used for my
Ah,
character.
yes. Okay, well, okay, there's the cheap way of doing it. Every innkeeper, yes, can I help
Right.
you? Oh, this is stock innkeeper number 36, say your players. Um, or there's also the thing where I don't believe that everybody should have to be a good thespian. And frankly, when you've got a table full of fat, bearded guys like me, usually wearing inappropriate t-shirts. Now, of course, the good thing was my play group from the very beginning was all ages and both genders. So it was always different than that. But when
Mhm.
you're dominated by hairy, overweight guys, it is incredibly off putting to someone new to the game. Hi, I'm an elf maiden. Oh, and mated with what I look like. So, but there are ways of gently doing it at the table where you speak like this. I'm
Right.
the elf maiden, as opposed to Ragnar the warrior who just wants to kill something. Why are we talking to this pointy-eared lady when we could be out here killing things? Or I'm exaggerating, of course, but yeah, you do the voices, and it's more about the pacing and describing what's going on in the world around you without over describing and killing the pacing. It's enough so that you can bring suspense. And then when it's the middle of fighting, you can say, what are you doing this round? 10, 9, 8, 7, 6. Oh, you do nothing. And the orc swings at you, and you bring up the pacing, and then you bring it back down. And then you give your players time to breathe. And you also give your players and encourage them to do it. If they're discussing things, having a council of war, do it in character. Speak as your character and take the time. Sit around the table. You're the great adventurers. You decide what adventure you're going to. And to do that,
Exactly.
you have to have your world detailed, because otherwise it's, well, I just bought the new module and I'm going to run you through it, guys. Whether you want to or not, no matter what direction you ride, you will run into this adventure at page 6.
Yeah.
And I never want to be that DM. So I had to create the world,
Mhm.
and then I leave it up to the and I also encourage the players to have jobs outside adventuring, to have friendships outside adventuring. So it gets to be like a 1980s or 1990s TV drama sitcom where you have recurring non-player characters they interact with every day. They have side jobs. They owe people money. They have to make rent. They're looking to buy food, all this stuff, so they're enmeshed in the real world. So instead of saying, "Oh, let's kill a king and take over a kingdom," it's like, "Hey, can somebody loan me a couple copper pieces because I got to make rent by tomorrow? And in
Right.
return, I will climb your apple tree and get those ones at the top you can't get, or whatever." Stuff like that happens all the time, so that all of your players feel invested in the world, immersed in it.
So let me ask you this. So you've got the Forgotten Realms, the Sword Coast, and this whole area. Do you have a favorite location in the Forgotten Realms?
Nope. That's like saying, which of your children is your favorite?
Right.
Okay, I have some areas that we do use over and over again that were foci for campaigns: Waterdeep,
Mhm.
Shadowdale, and the dales around it, Cormyr, and there's one place that I think would be beautifully beautiful to be in physically, and that's the banks of the Unicorn Run River coming out of the high forest, which is all unicorns and huge old trees with moss thick all over them, and a beautiful clear stream, all that stuff. So, but I deliberately don't play favorites, and there are places that are better suited to this sort of adventure or that sort of adventure. But there are hundreds of places in the realms I'd love to visit
Oh
if
yeah.
it was a real. And the thing is, I know I mean, I am crazy. We're all crazy, but I'm no more crazy than the average person. But I can walk through the realms in my head and see it around, and I've always been able to do so. That's how you build it.
Yeah, I can see the same. You know, I built a campaign based off of Metallica and Primus songs. Um, you know, the
Okay.
big bad was the master of puppets, and I just used the song titles as inspiration for each adventure. And so from there, I've built cities and towns, and I can see that in my head too. So I can see what you're saying, and having
Hmm.
so many years of it of playing that world is just I can see your detail. You know, I can just
Wah!
imagine the
Yeah.
detail. Yeah.
Well, you see, that's the thing. There are peak gamers who don't like that level of detail, but my take on it is you're paying good money for something.
Mhm.
So I should save you the time of having to make something up on the fly when some annoying player says, "Okay, I stripped the body. What color is the underwear?" Because I'm gonna steal the guard's uniform and put it on so we can sneak in because I've seen Wizard of Oz, yo ho, and it works. So I stripped the body. What color underwear is he wearing? Well, you shouldn't have to make that up. If you want to make it up, fine. But as a dungeon master, you've got the story to handle. So if I'm going to sell you something, I should have done that work for you. And that's
Yep.
that's and inevitably people come along with questions. And some gamer is going to be a biologist. Someone is going to be a geologist. Somebody is going to be heavily into genetics and they are going to ask detailed questions. Okay, so if my elf has black hair and white nostril hairs and marries the gnome who has blue hair, what color nostril hairs will our kids? And so you go, okay, and you write it up. So you do that for like 50 years, and you have lore piled all over the house until you can't move. Um, and then everybody asks you to retrieve it because, hey, it's easier to ask Ed than to look it up.
Right.
So
Yeah.
you go crazy. Hi. And
Any favorite NPCs in your world?
hmm. Well, there's two answers to that. There's who would you like as slapstick entertainment, and who would you like to spend time with?
Right.
And by time with, I'm deliberately being polite and non-sexual, because otherwise the answer is, oh, the seven sisters, all of them, you know. but but I'm saying, who would you like to be in the company of? Who is good company? And for different things, there are things like, I would love to have a night of talking with Storm. Talking. I would love to get drunk with Mert. I would love to encounter Volo when he's already drunk. And somebody like Mert or Elminster is magically keeping his back upright and forcing him to go on talking. And he would spill the beans with no filters because he's in an inebriated state. There are other people I'd like to be with for a day of their governing. King Azun, Queen Fee, and watching her run her husband quietly from behind the scenes. There are all sorts of people I like. I'd like to be in Storm's kitchen in Shadowdale while she trains yet another new group of Harpers about life, not just, how to kill somebody barehanded in 5 seconds and catch the bowl before he hits the floor. And she used to do these things with the bowl of fresh eggs, and she'd throw it into the air and disable the two guys who were in the kitchen with her and then catch all the eggs before they hit the ground. And she said, if you can't do that, don't leave this kitchen, sort of thing. But I mean, I would love to have all those little moments, but for different things.
Yeah. And NPC is creation is probably one of my favorite things to do. Just to come up with an interesting background, backstory, something that's not. You try and stay away from the tropes. You know, you try and
Hmm.
create something different. And I've created quite a few that I'd like to meet someday, if only that were possible. But
I'm
they
gonna
live in your head.
I'm gonna step outside the realms for just a second and talk about a role playing game called Fate of the Norns, which I didn't come up with. It's published by Pendelhaven, who is Andrew Volkoskas up in Quebec in Canada, and I am doing a box set of a city with him, and we're doing it block by block, all the major NPCs. And for every one of them, you find out their dirty secret. You
Hmm.
find out what they're really like. So you will have a city full of developed characters that you can pick out and use in any campaign, and it's all there. And all of their, if you do character creation right, if you have a critical mass of NPCs, they generate new adventures.
Yep.
Just what's there. They strike sparks off each other. The interactions that the player characters have with them, they go, hey, let's go back to that blacksmith. He knew all about magical swords. We'll ask him if there are any, that haven't been found that are local legends of, being lying around somewhere. And of course, they get there when the smith is just having an argument with a mysterious stranger who has six eyes floating around his head, and he leaves. He says, "We will not speak of this." "Oh, we wanted to ask you about magic swords." And then he says, "I told you we will not speak of this." And then the player characters who are on the ball look at the guy with the floating eyes, says, "He must know something about magical swords. Let's tail him." And
Right.
on you go.
Guild are NPCs. I know my Villains and Layers projects have sold extremely well, and they're built to um, give the DM an NPC plus adventure ideas, how to use them within the game. And I think we've seen a lot of NPC adventure books out lately, and I
Hmm.
think it might be oversaturated here on on the Dungeon Masters Guild. But
I don't think you can oversaturate DM toolbox things. You can oversaturate them from one venue in two. I mean, over that'll be a need that'll never go away. It's like when I used to do early TSR adventures, and they'd say, "Ed, we don't care what you put in this because you have to have it in by Friday. But we need new monsters, new magic items, new spells. And it'd be really cool if you came up with one of your weird treasures that has a backstory so it'll lead to other things." Sure, no problem. Blah, blah, blah. Boom. You make sure those are in, nothing else matters. And there were times they'd say, "Yeah, we can tell you don't write adventures." Holy crap. But we got a lot of good stuff in here we can plunder. And I said, "Do you know how most dungeon masters use your adventures?"
yeah, they've
And
just
they
yeah.
said, "Yeah, yeah, we know. Nobody runs it as written. They plunder it for the good stuff." Yes.
It's so difficult to run an adventure as written because your players do so many different things that you just can't.
Oh, sure.
A writer can't account for some of the things that happen. So
Oh, sure. And any adventure that has neon lit signs saying, "Dungeon this way, go this way," the player characters come out of the tavern, they look at the neon sign, they go, middle finger to the neon sign, and they go the other way
yeah,
because they're player characters. And if they're going to be the heroes who write their own stories and boldly change the world by their actions, of course they're going to do that. They're not going to follow the herd. That's for the king's stupid guards, the ones that we kill by the dozens in every adventure.
we've got a couple questions in chat I want to get to real quick.
Sure, let's do that.
So what do you think about 5e's version of the realms? Is there anything that you'd change?
Yeah. Um, for various good reasons, Wizards of the Coast has been confining themselves largely to the Sword Coast.
Hmm.
And in the Adventurers League, they have allowed two groups to strike out into other areas.
The
The
Moon Sea and the Border
Moonshaves,
Kingdoms. Yeah.
yeah, and I have been privileged to be one of those groups, and they're fun. And we're working on other areas. Hint, hint. Um, um, but every edition of the game, when when TSR originally or Wizards of the Coast now comes out with a new edition of the game, I go, "Oh, come on, fellas! I get why you sell me new editions because the core books always sell the best. But you've interrupted my carpet bombing of the entire planet again." And they also want to go back to quote popular areas, so we do Waterdeep over and over and over again. I love Waterdeep, but I want to cover the city next door, and I want to cover the environs, and I want to cover every bit of at least the continent of Faerun in
Hmm.
full detail before we move on.
Hmm.
And I keep getting interrupted in this. So, yeah, if I could change one thing on 5e, I would set stuff everywhere. Now, the good reasons why you don't do that is if you're licensing out stuff, it's an awful lot easier for licensee to to tell them, "Oh, we haven't done anything there, so you can do anything you want in that area." So it's a lot easier. But as a greedy dungeon master, I want the whole realms covered deep. I mean, after all, if farmers have to spread manure on their fields, I think we should spread lore at least as deeply, everywhere, on every square inch of the place. And then, of course, you step in it. But I mean,
Another one is curious on your thoughts about Watsy's spell plague. That the person knows the numerous Forgotten Realms authors disliked how things led into 4E.
mm, well, again, the spell plague for the same reason. It's a handy reset because you can take any elements you don't like, whether it's a plus 17 singing sword that you foolishly gave your players, or a god you don't like, and remove them
Hmm.
and reset. But again, it interrupted my carpet bombing,
Right.
and what no of greater annoyance to me was not the spell plague; it was the 100-year jump because there were so many um, characters who just presumably died of old age off stage or died in the chaos of the spell plague, and we never got their story to hear their stories. Um, and again, that was a 100 years have passed. You can change who's king of so and so, and you can have a different duke on the throne. Do anything you want. It's easier to get in for a beginning DM and beginning players. Yes, it is, but that's not the setting that the realms is. The realms is the setting that has the lineage of this noble family back 600 years with all their skeletons in all the closets and the ability to have each one of them generate an adventure. So that's one of the things I didn't like, the disruption, the fact that I couldn't finish telling the stories of a lot of people. And there were a lot of novels, not just by me, by many people that were building to something, and we just sort of got snatched away from us. Meanwhile, 100 years later, it was like, no, don't do that. At least give us a swan song novel so we can all wrap stuff up.
Right.
Um,
Right.
anyway,
No, no, no. That's cool.
yeah.
Here's another one. Well, there's quite a few questions in chat. I'm going to try and go down these. Let's see. Do you cringe when people extend your ideas and stories, or do you encourage it? Like if you
Oh,
wrote a whole book and developed it, like say the writers of the Red Cloaks, would you bristle at that?
nope, that's fine. The realms is for everyone to play with. The only thing that irks me is when somebody says, "Oh, I get to play with Ed's toys." Okay, we kill them all
Hmm.
because you're taking them off the table for everybody else to play with these fun toys.
Yeah.
Um, Attrition of this or that individual person, or have a character who has a known flaw which becomes their folly and they die because of it, or there's a spectacular disaster because of it, that's fine because that grew out of the character and their story. But don't just it's the old rule. If you go and play in another kid's backyard, don't break their toys,
Exactly. Yeah.
don't pee in their sandbox, and don't steal anything. Leave it as the way you found it. And that's basically the thing. But if you just want to take the world and run with it, it's your version of the realms. Do it. I don't mind. That's cool. That's
Yeah.
some of the excitement. You see, the one thing when you create a world all by yourself, the one thing it cannot do is surprise you because you're creating everything. So I've had um 55 years of working on the realms now, and the published realms has been going for, we're getting on 4 decades, and I've got to see lots of people run with stuff. It 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 irritates me minor league when somebody deliberately misinterprets something. And like, for instance, we had in the Avatar trilogy, people were writing about Harper Troopers, and I was saying it's the Harpers. They're like the Sierra Club. They're like Aragorn. They're not like GD American Civil War guys, all in the same uniform, galloping everywhere with their sabers out. They are not troopers, but somebody ran in that direction. So if somebody like twists something and changes it so it doesn't feel like the realms to me, that bugs me. But if it grows in that direction and they're because of the story they're telling, that's just fine.
Hmm. That's great. It's great to have that kind of feedback from you, that support, from the original
Make the
creator.
realms your own. Do
Yeah.
your own thing. If you want to set the entire campaign in the halls of Candlekeep, do it. If you want to say Harlequin didn't buy my romance novel, so I am going to shamelessly use the kingdom of Cormyr to write endless romance novels where old widows seduce and conquer the young male nobles of the kingdom and they ride off into the sunset happily ever after. Cool. If that's what turns your crank, do it. Only,
Yeah.
of course, you can't publish them because you can't publish fiction without Wizards say so. So don't waste your time writing, or at least if you're going to write them, have a plan B with all the serial numbers filed off so you can publish them as non-realms novels. But
Hmm.
if that's what turns your crank, and I have just between you and me and saying no names, I correspond on occasion with fantasy writers who work out their novel plots by setting them in the realms and writing them, getting to the end, and then de-realmsifying them, and they've got the bones of the book. And that is just cool. That just delights me that the realms works for them like that. It would be like um, me selling Roombas and then saying to people, you can only use them for this purpose. No, if you've bought the Roomba and you want to put it on your gravel roof and clean your gravel roof of all the bird doo-doo, do it. Now, you'll probably have to clean the gravel out of the Roomba every 5 feet, but hey, do it. It's your Roomba now. You know, I'm not going to say,
Right.
oh, should only be used on beige carpets like in our commercial. You know,
Right. Right. Okay. Here's another one for you. Uh, how did you think up the weave?
I had to explain things that had happened in various novels and game products, some of which I hadn't written, none of which I had any control over, because I've always just been a freelancer. I've never been a staffer at TSR or WotC. So things would come out and I go, they did what? Oh, okay. Uh, I need to come up with an explanation for this. And the weave was see, here's the thing. If you have a high magic world, which is the realms is a high magic world, why is the goddess of magic not goddess number one? Why is she not telling all the other gods what to do? There has to be a limitation on her. And yet, um, many writers and designers seem to want to love killing Mr. Off over and over and over again because it's a good plot device. Well, maybe. Maybe once. Third and fourth time, it's like, oh, I've seen this movie before. But anyway, um, if you kill off Mistra, okay, everybody dies. All the magic users, they go nuts. All the buildings you used magic to erect, they all fall over. And of course, the spell plague did do a lot of that. But um, usually in their novels and books, that doesn't happen. You know, like Bane can kill Mistra, and you can't get new spells, but not everybody blows up at once, and not all the magic goes well, or maybe it does, but only in a low class way. Well, how could that happen? Okay, Mistra is the weave, and the weave is all over the planet. The weave is sort of like how we access the natural energies of the world. Everything, wind, tidal, kinetic, um, the convection, all of the natural energies of the world, volcanic and the heat from the core, all of that. And arcane magic is one way of accessing it. Divine magic is another way of accessing it. And how does divine magic work? Well, the gods use the weave because it's an easy shorthand. It's the difference between trying to drive the car you just bought directly from your house to the supermarket without using roads. Crash, bang, thud through
Mhm.
everybody's fences and so on. It doesn't work. Use the roads that are already there. It's much easier. The weave is the road. It's already there, so everybody uses it for swift convenience, which is what allows you to cast a spell and it works instantly. Instead of saying, in a week, that feather will be slowed down. But as for right now, crash. Now, if you want the spell to work instantly, you need a fast acting conduit, and that's the weave. So Mistra is the weave. So killing Mistra makes the weave go nuts. But the weave has been anchored because she foresees all this stuff. She builds safeguards into it, and various people like Volo, like Elminster, are weave anchors. Volo doesn't even know he's a weave anchor, which means he can do stupid things all his life, and his guardian angels, to wit, Mistra and Azuth and all of the chosen, will watch over him and keep him alive because he's a weave anchor. And the weave will not collapse because the weave is anchored in all sorts of things like the Athora, which that's been revealed on the DM's Guild. Look for Tyrants and Scarlet, which is a free product on the DM's Guild, written by George Krashos, and it tells you about the Athora, which is an artifact hidden in Thay. Oh my goodness, Thay! I should talk more about that, but I won't. Anyway, and it's also anchored in people like the Chosen and others. The Tom Bombadils of the realms, if you will. Why are these crazy near immortal people walking around, and what keeps them alive, and so on? Well, they're weave anchors, and because they are people walking around all self-willed and they could be anywhere, nobody can take down the weave because they can't take care of all the weave anchors at the same time. It's spread out too widely, and that's deliberate, and that explains why you can kill off Mistra and not have everything go skaflooey, which sort of forced on me. And when that idea was forced on me, I sort of said, okay, if we reinterpret everything in that light, it explains so many things. So you then just start adding the little explanations and ties on, and then it becomes something you can't divorce from the world. It's everywhere. Wahaha! It's
Ah,
like the tax man. It's everywhere. No.
right, exactly. That's really interesting how you develop that. Here's another one. So you've been involved with a few things on the DM's Guild. Um, One is Elminster's Candlekeep Companion, which I'm sure will become even a greater seller than it already is once the Border Kingdoms. Both of these are pretty well lore driven, I would imagine. Someone else asked, are there any recent projects from Wizard of the Coast or the DM's Guild that have done you proud in regards to realm lore?
Sure, lots of them. I would mention one other set of projects that Steve Fiddler of Vorpal Dice Press has.
Omran's Almanac,
Yeah,
what is?
all of those.
Yeah.
Because you can use those in any fantasy world. They're dressed for the realms, but it's sort of like, here are all the coast monsters, here are all the desert monsters, here are all the Arctic monsters, here are all the mountain monsters, and plants. So my main contribution to those, aside from writing a foreword, which was a way of sneaking other lore in about them, was to write fauna and flora. So I'm writing just the idea for a new monster, and I'm writing all sorts of herbs and wild plants and so on that you can use in cool ways. So if you want tons of poisons or medicines or perfume scents or food that you wouldn't expect to find in the middle of the desert, for instance, those are great fun. And I've worked on many other projects, such as one with you. No, no,
Yes. That
yeah.
that one's coming up. That's going to be probably a closer to fall release. But yeah, Ed, myself, and Teo Sabadea are working on something. So we are
And I
that
I am actually working on other things that haven't been released yet either. And I will say
which
only one thing: Volo.
well, it's great to hear that you're involved with DM's Guild projects. I think that's amazing that you work with other creators on their stuff.
It's fun. This is my little period where okay. There were times, was it 1989? I did 11 Realms products in one year. and I had a full-time job, which I had to commute 100 miles to and 100 miles home from every day. By the end of the year, I didn't know what my own name was.
Hmm.
Okay. So I don't want to do that pace anymore. And I've been doing a high pace for years, turning out multiple novels a year. It's great fun. But many friends I've made in gaming and friends I've made writing have said, hey, someday we should do a thing on bathtub rings. Yeah, let's do an anthology about stories that involve bathtub rings. That'd be cool. We'll do it someday. And finally, I realized, okay, I'm getting old. I'm going to die sometime. I better get a little bit down on the honey-do list, the
Yeah.
bucket list. I should make some of these go away. So I started working on all sorts of projects, and it's so much fun collaborating with people, particularly when they're doing something to do with the realms or something completely different. Like I'm doing etiquette in a fantasy kingdom. So you have sort of like um, Restoration England, and how do you invite a fairy queen to tea? You know, how do you address her in the letter? Does she leave her card? All this stuff. So it's something completely different than the realms. So I'm having fun doing stuff like that. And it has been so much fun that I can never die because I'm so busy doing stuff. I'm working on computer games. I'm doing the city. I'm doing city blocks as fast as I can, and detailing them all. And I'm just having great fun. And I'm writing short stories, and I'm consulting with people, and it is this COVID lockdown isolation thing has not been for me, because for me it's been everybody in the world contacts me, sometimes all in the same day, and they all want to talk about stuff and they all want to do stuff. And do you have this lying around? Could I have like 16 cool names for Victorian ladies? Okay, now I need 6 names for whores. Okay, I'm on it. And it's just great fun. I may soon like say, okay, I've really got to get to work on the novels again, because I got all these novels sitting on my desktop and they all just sort of gathering dust because I'm having so much fun doing this other stuff, and I'm getting the bucket list down, and that feels so good.
Yeah, that's actually another question: is will we'll see any new Realms novels from you?
Uh okay. To do that, I would have to come to an arrangement with Wizards of the Coast. The
Hmm.
new Realms novels are all licensed. Okay. So in the case of Bob's novels, you need a publisher who's really interested in doing it, and which he has. So therefore, yes, we can go right on doing, novels. At the moment, I am too busy.
Hmm.
I would love to, but I would have to convince a publisher. We'd have to come to some agreement. And here's the thing: if you're writing for Wizards of the Coast, it's easy when there's an editor still on staff. I had Susan Morris for years, great editor. And I've had other editors as well, Phil Athens, for the games. I've had Kim Mohan and so on. Um, but if they don't have any editors left on staff that handle fiction, what it means is an approvals process that just stops you dead for 6 or 8 months because they're busy doing gaming stuff. Oh, Ed's new novel. I'll get to it. I'll get to it. Yeah, really, I'll get to it. So you're just sitting waiting. Well, that's time I could be spending making more of this fun stuff.
Yeah, yeah, I agree. I agree.
But yeah, I
Uh,
would love to, if you said to me, Ed, we need 5 Realms novels by the end of the year, and then could you give us 5 a year for the rest of your life? I would say yes in a heartbeat. You
you
know,
could create them that fast. You could create 5 a year.
oh yeah, that's no problem. Shutting me up is the problem, not getting me to produce the stuff. Yeah, 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 yeah. It's like you just zoom them out there. Now, I might occasionally need an editor to say, that's getting up to 800 pages. Chop! Could you write an ending scene and then come up with a title for the next one, and we'll just go on? Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah. Okay, for someone role playing Elminster, what would be your top 3 suggestions on how to portray him as true as they can?
Elminster is whimsical. Elminster is moody. Elminster wants you to solve your own problems, but he's not at all adverse to giving you hints. Like, if you had found the secret door 3 rooms back, you now wouldn't be on the brink of death, now would you? Hmm? He's very much like that. He's always doing something weird. And to give you an example, if you've seen the movie Excalibur, the Boorman movie, uh, early on in it, um, and this is going to come as no plot surprise to anybody who knows the Arthurian legends. Arthur draws the sword from the stone. And of course, there's great controversy, including the man he believes to be his father saying, "Put it back, put it back." Okay. And as they are talking about this, and there's great controversy, in the background, in the center of the shot, out of focus, is an old man walking towards them. He's not really in focus yet because he's not close enough. He Arthur says, "Merlin? Who is Merlin?" And he steps forward and says, "I am Merlin." And okay, so that is also the sort of thing Elminster does. He arrives at just the right moment. He delivers his pithy quote. If I was stealing a pithy quote from Excalibur, it would be, "But it is the doom of men that they forget." And then he goes on again because he's terribly busy saving the world, doing 16 different things to serve Mistra, which could be mainly sowing magic for others to find. And he really doesn't have time to deal with your problem. And it's about time you stood on your own 2 feet and dealt with your own problem. But because you're an idiot, like everyone around him is an idiot, you need to be set on the straight path. So he goes, "There, see that there? That's your straight path. Follow it. Try not to screw up this time." And then he's gone. So he's as annoying as heck. And he's whimsical, and he is just generally a pain in the ass. In other words,
S-
you want him to be so that the party will never rely on him.
Uh-huh. How true is that to who you are?
Oh no, okay. People always think Elminster's a self-insert or whatever. Um, you got to remember, I was 5 years old when I started writing the Realms. No beard, nerdy, quiet little guy, black plastic unbreakable glasses. Okay, I did not model Elminster on me. Elminster was being written full-fledged back then. I was later asked by TSR to portray Elminster at various Gen Cons, and I did with great glee until they told me to stop. Please stop. You know, because they didn't want that anymore as the brand, which is fine. Um, so Elminster isn't me by any means. Elminster is the guy who I wish I could be rude enough to be. He's the guy who comes in and says, um, "I couldn't help but notice 3 fields away that your Freudian slip is showing," and then walk away.
Nice. That's very nice.
Um, the one who tells your boss, you one should never comment on a lady's appearance, but are you colorblind, or do you just pick a random garment and put it on, back to front, inside out, whatever, just for our amusement, and then walk away? You know, things that you would never ever do in real life. Elminster does. So he's sort of like, "Ooh, if I could just be a complete horse's rear end, I might be Elminster," but no, never.
Yeah,
Elminster's smarter than me. He's kinder than me. He's more lovable than me. And he's more irritating than me, I hope.
that's great. Okay, a couple. Okay, we were talking about Realms lore earlier, and I
Mhm.
know you're involved in a project called the Fey Project. I don't know the title or anything yet, but I think we've been given the okay to talk about it. Can you give us a little bit of uh, description of what that project is or what you're involved
Sure.
in?
Um, Alex Kammer, um,
Gamehole Con?
and
Or no? Yeah.
um, and one other conspirator. I'm trying not to give too much away, and I are working are, 1490s. So what is Thay like today? And some things in this project may change because Wizards wants to look at it before we publish it.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so they could say, no, don't do that. Or I mean, and we are trying to give you, for the first time, a full. Um, Now, nothing's ever full, but what I mean is, who rules each Tharch? What are they trying to achieve as people? The trade goods, the fashions. How do they treat slaves? Everything to do with Thay. So that you could describe a street. So you could describe, if you burst into a Thayan's house, you could describe what their furniture looks like. Do they have plants around? Do they have paintings and statuettes? What are they of? Um, how does their society work? In the morning, do you get up and make breakfast, or does your servant or slave make breakfast? Okay, what food do they serve you? Where does it come from? All that stuff, so that you can actually make the society work, rather than this king killed this king, and then we got to the present day. I need to bring the society alive so you can make anything up and say. And that's what I want to do in every corner of the realms, but this is the next big one. Well,
Yeah.
next big one except for Volo. Volo is down at the city level, and I'm working with another group of people to do one city brought to you by Volo. And then I may go down even further and do one city ward brought to you by Volo.
Okay. That was actually another question is much like Keith Baker did with Eberron, would you ever consider publishing something on the DMs Guild that was a source book for a certain area that hasn't been actually developed yet, or
Sure.
in 5e?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I just need to send in the clones. There must be
Yeah.
clones,
Do you
because
find it
there's
easier
only.
to work with collaborators than with that?
Oh,
Is
no,
are the,
no. Working with collaborators is always more work than doing it yourself. Always. It's not half the work, it's twice the work. But um you working with collaborators is fun because I get to work with fellow gamers, I get to make new friends, or I get to work with existing friends. And it also means I can get more done if I have 8 or 9 or 10 or 12 projects on the go.
Mhm.
Because the things that I'm slow at, I mean, I can do my own black and white line art, but I'm slow at art. I could lay out my own book, but I do it old school with a waxer and X-Acto knives and so on. The new stuff to do it with yeah, I mastered PageMaker. Holy crap! But I've never mastered InDesign.
I can use Word for
Yeah,
layout, and I
no,
have other people.
do not use Word as a page layout
I've
program.
figured it out. It's taken some time, but I figured it out. But I have other people now doing InDesign for me for my
Yeah.
layouts. So
Well, okay, I can tell you that a lot of second edition Realms products, in order to force me not to overwrite anymore, because it was a benefit for TSR at the beginning, because they just chop off my extra stuff and get a free product out of it. But later on, it became more work for the editors because they were really tight deadlines, and they wanted me to bring in stuff that wasn't too long, so they didn't have to edit it down. They started sending me Word templates and saying, just type in the Word template. That'll tell you when you're running too long, because it'll fall off the end of the page and onto the next page. And we only need, and in the old days, we had to storyboard our own products. They literally sent you this blank thing with the pages drawn out, page 35, page 36, and you drew on. I got a half page horizontal and a half page vertical, and I've got this much text left, and we would do the storyboard. They didn't always follow it, but they wanted us to do it, so it made sense. The product would arrive making sense. So yeah, those things slow me down. So if I collaborate with somebody who's fast on those, and I just give them the text and they massage it to look nice, then I can get more done faster. So yeah,
mhm.
I'd love to collaborate with people, but I'd also love to do stuff on my own. But I'm too slow to
I,
do the layout, the actual physical. If
yeah.
somebody would say, guess what? We can go back to second edition standards. Just effing type it on a white piece of paper and put it on the DM's Guild. You can scan it on your home all in one thingy, and we'll stitch together a crappy PDF from that, and that'll be good enough. I'd say, good, I'll do it tomorrow, because that I can do. It's still slow, but I could do it.
Um, Another question is, so with the Candlekeep book that's on the DM's Guild now,
Hmm.
did you have any um, contribution or any work done with the current WotC Candlekeep book that's coming out? Did
No,
you make
not
any?
not to my knowledge.
Okay,
Um, I work on a lot of books without realizing it because they just pick up my lore, both published and unpublished. Um, but no, no direct contribution to
okay,
Candlekeep Mysteries. No, um, I have no idea how much of Candlekeep Compendium was shared with them, or if they just examined a copy.
right.
Because if I was them, I would use Marco's wonderful map,
It's an
just
amazing
because.
map. That's
Yeah,
just an amazing map.
because if somebody draws the map for you, that's half the thing when you're doing adventures set
Hmm.
inside a large complex of buildings. Good, just use the map.
Yeah, yeah. Here's another one. Which of your works would you recommend to someone just being introduced to the Forgotten Realms?
Game or fiction?
I would say well, would the Grand History of the Realms, would that be cover both?
Um, yeah, but you see, the grand history is all it does is give you um endless answers when you're already a fan of the realms, and show you the great sweep of the world if you're not. If you're actually starting play, the third edition Forgotten Realms campaign setting, the beige book, actually covers the most ground inside one set of covers. If you were adventuring in a given area and a Volo's guide covered that area, I would start with the Volo's guide for that area. If you want to travel a lot and like merchant caravans and visit a lot of cities, go back to the second edition Forgotten Realms Adventures tome, in which I drew the maps for about 20 cities in a week and put them all in there. Uh, um, because it gives you a quick overview of a whole pile of cities.
You
And
know,
so it's down to what do you want to do in the realms, and I'll tell you, here's what I would use as a core.
yeah, you mentioned those Volos books. Now, I was out of D&D from the 1990s until about 2016. And so I came back basically at the end of fourth edition and beginning of fifth edition. And the books I purchased were the fifth edition books. And going back and being a writer now and playing the game and everything, I'm looking at my other buddy's books, and he collected like every edition, has everything, and you see all these different Volos books, and it's just amazing how much content was put out, for that type of thing. And you don't see that now with WotC, and I think part of that's because of the DM's Guild. A lot of stuff comes out there, but they're also, I think, just kind of trying to trim their efforts and be more.
It's a different approach. A
Yeah.
tiny crew of dedicated people is putting out what are, in effect, super adventures. So
Hmm.
it's adventure driven as opposed to let's cover the whole world.
Yeah.
Okay. And in some cases, like when you are Storm King's Thunder covers almost all of the Savage Coast North, but it can't cover it in depth because it's racing from place to place. Um, if you do the Strahd adventure, um, you really do get Barovia nicely detailed because it is a small encompassed spot. But yeah, by and large, they're not trying to do setting so much as they are trying to do adventure. And who am I to argue with that? It's worked beautifully and they're gorgeous books. But from my point of view, um, I would love it if they would phone me up and say, "Hey Ed, um, here's where we're going in the next 3 years. Could you do Volo's guides to all these things that we'll just publish on the sly?" Sure, no problem. Here you
Yeah.
go. Because I'd be happy. And I'd say, "What are you doing in your adventure?" And they'd say, "Well, we can't tell you that." As I'd say, "No, no, no. I need to know what not to cover. So I stay out of your way."
Yeah.
Because my whole point would be to give you the dungeon master everything else. Like, for instance, Waterdeep Dragon Heist. What if you're not going down into the dungeon of the Mad Mage? What if you want to play in the city of Waterdeep? That's where I would want to do every single ward of the city, a Volo's guide. Who lives in every building? What can you buy there? What does it
Hmm.
look like? And what do all these people do for day jobs? And what are their side fiddles? And who's part of which guild? And who's part of which cabal? And who hates so and so and is feuding with so and so? I want all that in there so the dungeon master can say, "Ah, we can walk down any street or alley in Waterdeep, and this guy's given me enough stuff to start running the adventure with." Yes,
Yeah.
that's what I want to do. Now,
Yeah.
there aren't enough years left in my look. I'm old. I'm old. I'm no longer beautiful and so I can't. I can't. I will not be able to do them all before I die. So I charge thee that you have to take up the mantle and start. Yeah, no, but that's the thing. I can't do everything, but I would love to. I would love to spend the rest of my life just detailing the realms. It would be really nice if somebody would pay me tons of money, so I don't have to worry about paying bills. But more than that, I really don't care how much I just I would like to be able to turn around and say, here are my monthly bills, just pay them, and I can go on writing and not worry about anything else because
Yeah.
that would be my dream thing. Just sit there and churn the stuff out.
Yeah, that's my dream thing too. I think you would be more uh, closer to accomplishing that than I am right now. But you know, to have spent so many years working on this world is just amazing to me. And to have dedicated so much time to it and to see it, build from WotC also, and into official books, and having the
Well,
world the world actually experience you.
to walk into a store that is selling Halloween costumes and see this for sale, and I think, holy crap, a fleece throw with Waterdeep on it. I've made it. I'm in the
Yes.
big leagues. You
Yeah.
know,
Well, congratulations, Ed. I mean, it's an amazing story, and an amazing life you've had as far as writing for Dungeons and Dragons and everything. I think it's amazing, and you've been an amazing person too. And talking with you, you helped me with a game hole kind of adventure I'd written for the Adventurers League. Emails. You've always been a great person. So thank you very
that's what
much for
it's
that.
about. You
Yeah.
know, at making friends in gaming and having fun with them. Goodness knows if we wanted to make money, we'd all have become doctors or lawyers. You know, not
Right.
not gaming. We're in gaming because we love it.
We are in gaming
So
because we love it. Yep.
yeah,
Exactly. And we write because we love it, and we tell
yeah,
stories because we love it.
yeah. We can't stop
Exactly.
until
Yeah.
people cut us off because they just have to go to bed. You know,
Right.
that's what we do.
Oh, I remember all night sessions playing games. I mean, we'd end at 6 a.m. in the morning, sleep
Yeah,
for 2 hours and start again. It's a great time
yeah,
back when I was a kid. Couldn't do it now.
yes, yeah. No, 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 no. For one thing, the communal showers are now frowned upon. Now,
That's true.
particularly when somebody tries to hand you breakfast when you're in the shower. You know,
Hmm.
that's okay
Hmm.
when you're in university, but your body begins to rebel against such treatment. But you're right. Yeah, it really is a wonderful dream thing to be able to spend the time you want to spend gaming. It's just great. Yes, and yeah, yeah, and we've hardly talked about world building.
I know. We got off track, and we just
We'll have to do it again.
yes, we will. Yeah, I will put that down. World building part two. Ed, it
In
has been a
which we actually talk about worlds.
exactly, exactly. I know you don't take payment for interviews and everything like that, and I've mentioned this to you before the podcast started, or the stream started. But I'm going to donate $60 to the Trevor Project for you.
Thank you.
I
That's
appreciate
great.
you being on and talking to us here. Two things, or I need to say something that real quick. It is my nephew Sebastian Stevens' birthday today. I wanted to wish him a happy birthday, and also one of my game group, Lawrence Woods, is his birthday today also. So I just want to say happy birthday to those two gentlemen. One other quick question that we have is, how many fireballs is enough?
It depends on which side of the bathroom door you're on. um, did you have chili beforehand? That
Right.
that is
Good
there
answer.
there
Good
are
answer.
all these answers. Yes. Uh, how many fireballs do you think is enough?
One more than the other guy.
Yeah, it's all in the perception. Magic users have great big balls of fire, and there are things that you just don't cover in polite society.
Right.
Dudoosh.
Yes, exactly. Exactly. We're going to wrap this up then. Again, it's been great to talk to you. Again, my name is Jeff Stevens. This is the third episode of Jeff Talks RPGs. We're going to do this monthly. Just come up with different kinds of subjects. If you have any questions or any ideas for subjects, please let me know.
We may get to world building. No.
We might. You can find me on Twitter at jcorvinstevens. You can check out my web address at jeffstevensgames.com, and I'm also in the Dungeon Masters Guild. Ed, how can people reach you?
The best way is to go on Twitter, and I'm at the Edverse. At the Edverse, all one word. And that's the best way. And you can direct message or whatever they call it there. You can also reach me through the Mages and Sages podcast. There's a Facebook site, but that's a slightly more roundabout way. Jeff Thetford will get or Curry Russell will get the messages to me. But yeah, those are the best ways. Now that we can't see each other at conventions.
I remember seeing you a couple of years ago at Gamehole Con. I think you were walking around, and I'm like, "That's Ed Greenwood. That's Ed Greenwood." So now, next time I see you at Gamehole Con, I will say, "Hi, Ed. How's it going?"
Hi, and I will be stumping around with a cane. And no, who knows? Yes, I would love to come back to Gamehole Con. And hey, oh dear, Jenny. Well, I will try and make it back to Madison. Alex and I are already talking.
Hopefully, once this clears up, I mean, that was a great convention. I don't know if anybody, if listeners are here that haven't gone to it, Gamehole Con is a great convention. It's not too big, it's not too small, it's just right. It's about I think Alex said once it was 5,000 to 6,000 people throughout the weekend, and it was just right. You get to talk to people and everything. Great convention.
Great convention. Yes.
Yep. But anyway, let's sign off. Ed, again, thank you for showing up. I appreciate it. Great talking to you.
Thank you for having me. And I hope I didn't give you technical fits or any other sort of fits. Okay.
Nothing major. It was all good.
Okay.
And everybody, thank you for showing up. We appreciate you watching the show. And until next time, take care.
Keep your stick on the ice.